This video is going to cover how to add components into your building as well as then dimension it. With components, I'll show you how to load in components just from Revit by default, as well as then how to find some online, and then use the kind of just model in place tool as well for the components. So components are pretty much anything that is not like the building itself. So like while a window is sort of kind of like a component, it's more technically a family. Our walls, our floors, our roofs, kind of everything that just falls into the architecture tab are just the parts of the structure. And then components are things like toilets, cabinets, all the stuff that kind of goes into a kitchen and features that we might want to go and place into our building. Sometimes in architecture, we're putting them in there just to show, that this room layout works. You can fit a queen size bed in this bedroom or things like that. And then sometimes we have built-in things like a lot of kitchen stuff where we need to just kind of actually show where the kitchen and cabinets and stuff's getting installed. So I'm going to go into my level 1 floor plan by just double clicking on it here in my project browser. And sure, I haven't saved in a little bit since my last recording, so I'll just save it there. One thing with my floor being here is if I can't even see it if I click on it. I do have like a kitchen layout and everything shown in my drawing underneath or my CAD file underneath. Now, if I wanted to be able just to utilize that or look at it, what I can do is just kind of get rid of my floor temporarily. So again, one of the easier ways to do that is with VG. So in our floor plan view, we can either type VG or you can click on your visibility graphics here. And then I'm just going to type the letter F so I can go all the way to floors. And I'm just going to uncheck floors. I'm just going to make them not visible at all in this floor plan and then hit apply. So they still exist. They just don't show up in this view, which is just going to make it a little bit easier for me to trace around or place my components in there. Now, really what we're going to focus on in this project is just all of our built-in pieces. We can also put in like our washer dryer, our water heater. We should be able to put an air handling unit in as well. We're not going to like necessarily decorate or furbish the entire house for it. Now, to use the component tool, it is this button right here or keyboard shortcut CM. Now, you'll see when you enter the component tool, there are just not a lot of components loaded in by default. And again, that is just to try to make this bare bones file that we started with load and work as fast as possible. So what we're going to need to do, I'll hit escape a couple of times, is load families in. So again, to load a families, just like we did with our windows, you can either use the custom keyboard shortcut we made of LF, and that'll open up the family browser. Or if you don't have that keyboard shortcut set, you can go into the Insert tab up here and then load in Autodesk Family. There is a way to manually load all of the family libraries onto your computer. I just didn't go over how to do that, but you can figure out online how to do something like that. Just because it's around like a 15 gigabyte file, it takes up a lot of space. So you can either go into the Insert tab, click here to use the cloud one, or just keyboard shortcut LF. So the first thing I'm going to focus on is just some of our bathroom stuff. So you can find a lot of that stuff in the plumbing folder. You can also search up here. So without in any folder, I'm just going to search for toilet. It might help if I spell toilet correctly. And we also maybe want to search for water closet if you don't see toilet stuff pop up. But we do have a couple of toilets here. I'm just going to bring in this domestic 3D toilet, and then I'll click on load. Now that it's loaded into my project, I can use the component tool to place it in my building. So again, that's either keyboard shortcut CM or this button right up here. And you'll see that it defaulted to the toilet just because that was the last one I ever loaded. So it's assuming it's the one I want to use. And if I want to move it around or flip it, I can use the space bar on my keyboard to rotate it quickly. And I'm just going to kind of roughly place it on top of the toilets that already exist. So again, I'll use the space bar. Sometimes you might have to rotate it a few times. Sometimes it'll go for a 45-degree angle for whatever reason. So I'm going to place just my 2 toilets there, and once I'm all done, I'll hit escape a billion times. And then I'm going to load in like my bathtubs. So I'm going to go back into the load family tool, which again, I set as LF, or you can go into the insert tab and then load Autodesk family. And I'll search for bathtub. And we've got a couple of options available. Again, I always try to stick to just the most basic bare bones looking things because I'm not using Revit from an interior design side of it. So I'm just going to load in this rectangular bathtub. Again, I'll click load, and then I'm going to start my component tool, which is CM, or this button here. And it needs to be on a wall. So I need to be, it won't let me just place it here, but if I hover over this wall, it will let me place it. It's a little larger than my wall space, but that's okay because we're actually going to later on in the video move some of these walls around. And I'll place another one here. And then let's also load in our vanity sink. So I'm going to hit escape 100 times, load family again, so LF. Let me search for vanity up here. I'll usually use vanities just because there's this one here that already has like a countertop and everything built in, so it makes it a little easier. I'll check that one off and click load and back into my component tool. So CM, or click on the component button. Again, you can use the space bar to spin it. And even though it's not the same size as this one, that's more than fine with me. This one also happens to be like a plumbing specific style. So that's why it's got like a hot water and cold water input and a drain. You can do that for like your plumbing plans to make them in Revit too, but we're not going to cover that in this course. I'll use the space bar to flip it and place this one here as well. And then that should be good for my bathrooms. Let's hit escape a couple more 100 times and do like some of our closet work going on in here. So again, as you might predict, I'm going to do load family, LF, or go into the insert tab. And let's search for closet up at the top. And we've got our closet shelf, which this works a little differently. Each component has its own kind of ways of working. And the toilets came up because they're considered water closets. And then I'm going to use CM to start it. So with the closets, what you're going to do is you're going to switch it over to place it on a work plane, I believe. And then we can draw. I started on the wrong side of the wall. So when I started to draw it on my work plane, see that dash line that's popping up in the other direction? That's kind of like the bar that would be hanging. So I'm going to hit escape once, and then I'm going to start it on this side. And now I've got my bar sitting there. And if we go look at it in 3D, so if I go look at my 3D view, again, I can turn this section box on to sort of cut my building up a little bit. If you don't have your section box on, what you can do is in your properties bar, scroll down about halfway, and you have this section box option. So I'm about halfway down, right above the camera option. And then you get this big box here. You can click on it and you can move it in to sort of slice parts of your building open. Or in this case, what I'm going to do is take this top one and I'm just going to slowly move it down until I've cut my like ceiling off. And so I can see there if I look in, whoop, it's a little hard for me to orbit around to see it, but you can see here I've got like this closet shelf here. So I'll do the same thing then in this bedroom. I'm going to go back into my level 1. I'll use CM to start my component tool, or go into your architecture tab and click CM. Let's see if I'll start it on the right side. Nope, it didn't. So it defaulted to work plane, but see still how that dash line is on the other side. So I'll hit escape once. I'm just going to start it here. And then I'll do one this way. Not going to worry too much about how like these shelves overlap each other, though I could click this one and I could just bring it out or to just end there abruptly for it, but I'm not going to worry about it so much. We'll go to our utility room next. So you might guess the first thing we want to do is load in a family. That's keyboard shortcut LF. And I'm going to search for a washer. And we'll have just kind of a plain washer, a stacked washer dryer, a little bit of a nicer looking front loading washer. Anytime you see these green symbols, again, that means that it's going to have like electric components built into it. It's not the end of the world if you use them, but they just can be used within like MEP plans. I'm again going to load in my most basic washer and click load. And then I'm going to use component CM to bring it in here, even though it's a little smaller than the one in our default plan. Fine by me. And then I'm going to load in another family for my dryer. So that's LF. Let me search up here for dryer. Again, I want a pretty basic one. I always try to do very basic things. Since I didn't leave the component tool at all, it just automatically brought that dryer in and has me placing it automatically. So it's one way you can kind of expedite it a little bit. So I'll place a dryer there. Let's load in a water heater. And again, I won't exit the tool at all. So I'm going to do LF to start my loading my families. And I'll search for water heater. I'll click one that I want to pick. Doesn't really matter which of these. I'll load it in and then I can just place it on top. And then I believe they've actually added an air handling unit in, which is what this is here. So LF one more time. Let's search just for the word handling and see what we find. Okay, cool. We're seeing here, I wonder if I just bring in like this one. And the reason why I'm just trying to opt for this one is these seem like a little, I want to bring in the most bare basic bones thing I can, is always what I'm trying to find. And that's good. I can just put a box there. Hit escape a couple of times. And then the last, whoops, I actually got another closet piece that I got to load in here. So one thing I could do is I could just go back into the component tool, which again is CM, and I could choose out of all the components I've loaded in, I could go find my closet. You can also search up here. So if I just search for closet, I can find them. Or additionally, what I could do is if I click on one of these that I've already made, I could use the command CS, which is create similar, and then that'll just start it making one on a work plane and all the same settings. I'm going to try going from this side, and again, I did it wrong. Hit escape once, and I'll go from this side for a closet rod there. And then I'll hit escape a couple of times. Now, when it comes to kitchens, I find that the casework and countertop commands in Revit, I just personally am not a huge fan of them. So you definitely could load in a family. So that would be, again, keyboard shortcut LF. And if I just close out of my search bars, here in the casework category are kind of all of these different base countertops that you could load in, or base cabinet work and countertops that you could load in. I do use the countertops pretty often, but actually for base cabinets, what I kind of prefer for instead is just to load or create my own sort of generic model for it. So I'm actually going to close out of this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this little arrow underneath component, and I'm going to say that I want to model a component in place. Now, when I go to model a component in place, it's asking me what kind of family or what kind of component are you modeling? 99% of the time, I will just say that I'm making a generic model because it's just a little easier. I could say that I'm making casework, but I usually just like to say I'm making something generic. And then you have to give it a name. Again, the name you give it really has no bearing for it. So I'm going to call it cabinets. I don't think I spelled cabinet right. Cabinets, yeah. And I could even call it like lower cabinets if I wanted to. And then in this menu, I'm going to say that I want to create an extrusion. So I'm just going to make a solid 3D extrusion for my cabinets. So I'm going to click on extrusion. And then what I'm going to do is use my line tool to just kind of trace around where I want this countertop or cabinet to go. And I'm going to kind of stop where I want my stove to be, come back around this way, back around here. Again, it has to be one closed loop, like a floor has to be closed and a roof has to be closed. I can also use things like the rectangle tool. So I could come up here and click on rectangle to put kind of like this little spacer piece that's going to go on this side. And then our extrusion height for something like a counter, we'll say maybe that we want it at like 28 inches, 30 inches. It's going to always vary. We can also use handy dandy Google to say typical height of a kitchen counter. And then we can say that this says 36 feet or 36 inches, not feet. That would be a lot. So I could say that I just want it to be 3 feet tall. And I'll just leave it as just a generic model in here. Then I'll click the green check to finish it. And I'll click my green check one more time to finish it. So if I go look at it 3-dimensionally, what I've done in my kitchen is I've just made like some generic boxes to represent my like counters or my cabinets that are underneath there. I just find that a little easier than placing each cabinet individually. And we could even go further, or let's even, it looks like, what height is it sitting at? Because it looks like its bottom is sitting, hanging out underneath my floor even. Let's edit in place and let's see. It says it's on level 1. I'm going to pick a new host. Whoop, maybe not. Let me control Z. I just kind of want that bottom sitting a little bit higher, but I'll click on finish and we'll see. We can look at a couple of things. Again, I don't feel like re-recording, so I'm just going to bring this one in a little bit more. I'm trying to cut. There we go. So if I look at it from the front, what do I have going on here? Oh, I see what I did wrong. I have all my floors sitting 10 inches above the ground, which I see. I should have made these just 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to change those height offsets to 1/4 of an inch. And see, that's, I did 1/4 of a foot. So let's also adjust all of our floors. This one as well. 1/4 of an inch. Something that, you know, something I really like about Revit is this would have shown itself at some point. And now they don't seem like they're goofy sticking in the middle of everything. But like as we were going, didn't really think much about it. Okay, so that's why they were looking so strange. Now back to my level 1 floor plan. Putting in things like my countertops and like where my sink's going to be going. I'll usually just use the regular load components for that. So again, LF or in the insert tab. And then I'm going to search for countertop. Might help if I actually spell top correctly. Space in between, there we go. So with our countertop here, we've got like sort of like an L and then a sink on this side. Unless they've changed it in this version, if I try to use this one, because the sink's on that side, it won't like go over there automatically. I'm going to try this L one just to see. So I'm going to load this one in. I'm going to use my component tool, which is CM. Let's see what I can do. Maybe I can mirror it. So I'm going to put it this way, just kind of off in the middle of nowhere. And then I'm going to hit escape 100 times. Let's see. Okay, there we go. And then I can use my mirror tool. Maybe I was always able to do that. I always thought you just couldn't. I can then drag it into place. And I can also move its grip. So I can pull that grip down. If I wanted to move where the sink was sitting, I can also move the sink. I can move this grip around. And then I'm going to move this side in to be kind of flush with where I have my base cabinet sitting. Let's look at it 3D real quick, just to make sure that everything's kind of sitting flush with where we want it to go. So see how they're kind of clipping into each other? We don't really want that. So I'm going to click on these bottom cabinets, and I can either pull them down so that way they're sitting flush with the counter, or I can also use the align tool, which I can click on this button here or keyboard shortcut AL, and I can click on the bottom face of that counter and then the top face of my cabinets, and it'll just bring them to sit flush with each other. I could do the same thing of this side face of the counter to this side face of my cabinet to keep them flush with each other. Let's go back into my level 1, and I'll just put a little counter over here. So I'm going to use LF to load in a family, and I'm just going to load in just this straight countertop. And then I'm going to use the component tool, which is CM, or in the architecture tab. I'll place it to start, and then hit escape a couple of times, click on it, and then I can drag that countertop in. And that way I can just sort of get my kitchen going a little bit. Back into my level 1, let's also put in our stove and our fridge. So that's LF for load component. And let's search for, if I search for fridge, will it pop up? Oh no, I don't know how to spell refrigerator. Well, this is what I'll do then. I'll show you which one it's in, because it's really weird. All of your kitchen stuff category-wise is in specialty equipment. I don't consider having a fridge special, but let's click on specialty equipment. And then you'll see here that we have domestic specialty equipment. So this is where we would find things like dishwashers. We can find our stove. And then let me scroll down. Here's refrigerators. I hate that there's no like spell check in here. I'm just going to bring this one in. Pretty simple. And then I'll use CM for my component. If it's going to bug you like it bugs me, that the big giant word refrigerator is there, let me hit escape 100 times. You can click on it, go into its edit type, and then you could just say, I don't need a label on this fridge, and then it'll go away. Let's also load in like a range or a stove. So that's LF. It puts us back into the same category that we were last looking in. So I'm going to pick out, I'll use this like electric one because that's probably more realistic of what they're going to have in here. They're probably not going to have like a full big stovetop or anything incredibly fancy. And then CM. And I can place it. Hit escape a bunch of times. And again, if it's going to bug you for that label, you can click on it, edit type, and then get rid of that label for it. So at this point, we no longer are going to need any of our CAD file in the background. So we used it to help us get all of this part in here. Now, before we put any dimensions in, we want to hide or completely remove this CAD file because otherwise we might accidentally draw to it. So since we're done with it, we could click on it and we can hit the delete key on our keyboard just to totally remove it. I'm going to Control Z just to undo it for a moment, because another thing we could do that might be a better option is to click on it and then right click and hide it. So again, this would still leave the link there in case we ever needed to reference it, but it would just hide it from here. So we can say hide in view, and then we could hide the element or we could hide the category. Hiding the element just hides the one thing you have selected, and so now it's gone. Versus if I hit a category, if I went on this toilet and I right clicked and said hide in view category, it's going to hide all of my plumbing features from my building. Maybe that's not what I want to do. If you ever want to get something back that you've hidden, you can click on this little light bulb and then it'll show all of your hidden things. So I can click on this toilet and I could say I would like to unhide toilets or plumbing stuff. And you'll also see that this is another way we can get our floors back. If we wanted our floors back, I could click on this floor and I could say unhide, and now I have my floors back. Additionally, the ways you can hide and unhide things would be here in Visibility Graphics, keyword shortcut VG, or this button here. And this is where we can hide imports. So we could hide just all of the stuff related to our imported CAD file to just get rid of it temporarily. Now, before we go into dimensioning, just another thing to kind of keep in mind of what you could do for families is you'll notice when you look at the Autodesk families, there's not really a lot in there. And that's sort of similar to like how CAD blocks work, is other people are doing a better job of it. And so you can go online. There's two websites immediately that I would recommend. One would be Revit City. Revit City is a just completely like user-funded website where everything that's in here is stuff that other people have just made or customized themselves and then uploaded on here. You do need an account to download things, and it is completely free to make an account. Another one that I highly recommend is bimobject.com, which again, you need to make an account for it. But BIMobject is actually now linked along with Autodesk. I don't know if they completely own it or not, but there are a lot of companies that put their stuff down on here for you to be able to download and put into your buildings. And there's lots of other websites out there. These are just two that I would recommend. Another one that I think is great, but it does sort of cost money, is this plugin called Blocks. Might help if I actually type correctly. And Blocks is really great for putting stuff together for renderings. I believe it's like, it could be $10 a year, I want to say, is what it is to have the plugin with all of the features, though they do have some like free decor and pieces available within there for it. I no longer have a Blocks account though, because once the free version stopped getting really useful, I just kind of said never mind for it. So those are other ways that you can bring families into projects as well. The last thing we'll talk about in this video is going to be dimensioning. And now I'm not going to go through and dimension every single wall and feature in this house. I'm going to just demo how I would dimension, just like I'll do this whole side and the dimension strings. I'll even kind of start again here. And then it's going to be up to you to finalize putting your dimensions in. So all of our dimensions, we're going to follow them to keep them pretty much in line with what we have been given from the Dogwood file. So we want to keep pretty construction-friendly numbers. Now, one thing I will say is that this window here, from our face of stud to the center of this window, is 6'4". If your window's at 6'5", I'm not really going to care all that much. I'm just going to be looking for construction-friendly numbers. If it's 6'4" and 7/32, that's really obnoxious, and you can move and adjust pieces around. We also always want to make sure that we're taking our measurements from the face of our studs. So back in Revit real quick, we want to be able to see the face of our studs. So there's going to be two things that we're going to adjust. One is our detail level, which is this little box down here. If I adjust my detail level to fine, we can see sort of that our lines like went in there. I can see a little bit more of like or where my stud is, but the line weights are really just taken over. You can see too, like we got labels now on like our dryer and our washer. Our fridge even got a little bit more detailed. It just bumped the detail up in the whole drawing. But we still can't see much. I'm also going to adjust my view scale from 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to go to 1/4 of an inch equals a foot. And then that will adjust the line weights as well as any text sizes by default. And so now I can see that a little bit easier. Another way to make it really easy to see is to turn on a setting called thin lines, which is either keyboard shortcut TL, it just removes line weights from your drawing altogether, or this button right here. So you can either click on this button to turn thin lines on or off, or keyboard shortcut TL to turn them on and off. But this is the measurement or the line. This is our face of stud. This would be the inside face of our stud. So that's always where we're going to want to measure to. Now the dimension tool itself is keyboard shortcut DI or this little button right here. So it's either this button or keyboard shortcut DI. When I go to place a dimension, there's usually a couple of things that I like to adjust to make it easier. By default, it wants to go to the centers of walls. So I'm going to change that default to say, go to the faces of a core. So when I change that, it's going to be more prone to pick up that core face. Now, if I wanted to move where it's going though, what I could do is use the tab key on my keyboard to switch between things. So you can just hit the tab key. Sometimes you have to cycle through a couple. But what I'm going to do is place a dimension from this wall here. So I'm going to click on this wall. I'm going to zoom out, zoom in over here and click on the face of this wall. And then to place this dimension, I'm going to click up to place it. So now my building, yours could have a different number right now. That's fine. My building at the moment is 41 feet, 11 1/4 inch, which is just a silly number to have. So what I'm going to do is hit escape 100,000 times and then click on one of the walls this measurement references. And this usually takes a little time to get used to. If I want to change this to 42 feet, I could click on this wall or I could click on this wall. And you'll see when I click on the wall that this number became blue. It's now an editable number. So I can click on that number and I could say 42 feet, enter. And what it did was take this wall and shift it over 3/4 of an inch. It brought it 3/4 of an inch to the right. So now the building in total is 42 feet. What you could do is then click on this dimension string and lock it. What that means is as other parts or pieces move throughout this building, this has to be 42 feet. You've constrained it. I'm going to warn you that if you over constrain a drawing, it's going to make it really hard to move and modify around. But sometimes just doing like overall dimensions are a good thing to constrain. Now, for an overall dimension run in this way, we are going to want, let's see, I might need to zoom out a little bit so I can see what I'm looking at. We're 32 feet from face of stud to face of stud. So I'm going to place another dimension, which again is keyboard shortcut DI or this little button up here. I want to go to the face of stud. So I'm going to click on that wall. I'm going to scroll down and click on this wall. Zoom out, click to place it, hit escape 100,000 times, and then to change this number, you're going to click on one of the two things it's referencing. So I'll click on one of those walls, and then I can change this number to 32 feet, and it moved that wall out a little bit. And then I'll click on it I'll lock it in place. Now to do a dimension string, so here we have from the face of this stud to the face of this stud is 4 feet, from face to face 14 feet, from face to face another 14 feet. So if we want to do a string of 3 dimensions at once, what we can do is do those all in one single motion. So I can do, again, keyboard shortcut DI, or this button up here. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to click on this face. Notice how I'm clicking a little bit more in than I'm clicking over here, because this is technically part of this wall. So that's why I'm not staying real close into the corners. I'm going in a little bit. I'm going to click once, zoom out, zoom in a little bit, click again. Instead of placing this out here, I'm going to just go to my next wall and click again. Let me pan a little bit, go to my next wall, click again. And then I'll click out to place it. And it's just made this whole string of dimensions. Now, when you're moving these around, you want to kind of move in a sequence. So when I'm going to go change this to 4 feet, 14 feet, another 14 feet, I'm going to click on this wall, and I'm going to click on this, change the number. Let's unjoin and see what happens. It looks like nothing really changed, so that's good. But now if I want to go change this to 14 feet, what that's going to do is just shift that back down. So I need to kind of work my way up this sequence. So I'm going to click on this wall to change this number to 14 feet. And then that one changes by default. You could click or make all of these dimensions individually. It's just going to take a while to do. So that's why I always recommend kind of working in a string. So our next one is going from face of wall to the face of this wall, our like plumbing wall here, and then to the inside of our closet, and then the outside of our face of stud. So I'm going to place this string of 3. So again, dimension tool is DI, or this button here. I'm going to go from face of wall to face of stud to face of stud to then the outside face of this stud. And then I'll zoom out and I'll click to place where I want it to go, and I'll hit escape 100 times. If you wanted to move these dimension strings around, you could. The other cool thing you could do is if you've placed it on the wrong piece, you can click on this grip and you can move it to another piece if that's something that you needed to do or wanted to do. But in this case, I'm going to click and drag that back because I did in fact have it at the right spot. And so again, when I'm going to move these numbers around, I want 7 foot, and then this should become 5 foot 8.5 just by default when we go to move it. I'm going to click on the wall I'm referring to. Sometimes those witnesses will get in the way of each other and there's nothing we can do about it. Let's actually click on this wall. And I'm going to change that to 7 feet. 7 feet what I wanted? From here to here? Do those add up? 7'10". I just don't know how to read. Okay. I said, whoa. There we go. And then this changed automatically because of the fact that they all had to equal up to 14 feet. And again, if you wanted to lock pieces into place, you could. If I locked that dimension, what's going to happen when I click on this one is it actually won't let me like change it. I can't click on it to change it until I unlock it. Maybe after I've moved it, I've got to click on like my sink and move it out a little bit. I could also use the align tool, which again is up here, keyword shortcut AL, to just make my sink flush with my back of wall. The only number you're not going to be able to change in here, unless of course you've locked all of your numbers, but is like this 5.5 because it's measuring the stud itself. Let's just do another dimension string together. So this one's coming from face of stud to the middle of this window, to the face of our stud. So again, that is keyboard shortcut DI. I'm going to zoom in just so I know I'm clicking on the right thing. To the middle of my window, to the face of my stud, and then out to place it. Escape 100,000 times. And then what I'll do is click on my window to change it. So I'm going to make it 4'3". Enter. And now it is 4'3". And because I've made this 7'10", these two numbers have to add up to it. Let's just move. Maybe let's drag this one out a little bit more and drag this one out a little bit more. I'm just going to turn thin lines off real quick. Again, TL, just so we can see kind of the line weights that it's doing for us automatically that we don't have to worry about or think. I'll do just a few more in this video demo, and then it's going to be up to you to place them on your own. Dimensions are the thing that probably takes the most practice to get used to. And so I've already got my 42-foot one here. I'm going to do from face of stud to face of stud to face of stud, just around my exterior walls in this string. So that's keyboard shortcut DI. Since I have it to faces of cores, it'll kind of snap there a little bit, but I'm going to click, zoom out, zoom in on this wall, click again, zoom in on this wall, and notice again how I'm not on that corner. Click again, zoom out, click up to place it. And then I'll hit escape 100 times. To move these around, I could click on, say, this one. I'm going to click on this wall because if I change this number, this one will update with it since both of these are attached to this wall. So I'll say 18 feet, and then it automatically updated for me. For my next string, I'm going to go from face of stud to face of interior wall, face of interior, face of exterior, face of interior, 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 exterior. So let's do DI, and this time I'll leave one out on purpose to show you how we can add it in. So DI to start the dimension tool, I'm going to click on the face of my stud. The face of my stud. It's a little hard to see it with thin lines on, but since that's not getting highlighted, I know that's my stud. To my face of stud. To my face of stud. To my face of stud. This time I'll forget this one. You should click right here, but I'm going to forget. This one's kind of hard to get because of the way this wall is, but I want to click right there. And then on the inside of this exterior wall and the outside. And then I'll click up to place it. I'll hit escape 100 times. And then I'll realize, oh poopy, I forgot a wall here in my selection. I can click on this dimension string and I can say that I want to edit witness lines. And when I click on edit witness lines, I can add a witness line in. And then once you've added it, you can just click anywhere to stop or to end that edit. So you can add ones in, you can also do edit witness lines, and you can click on something to take one out. I did in fact want that one. So I'm going to click on it and hit click anywhere out of it. So for my measurements here, I'll do 12'3". So I'm going to click on this wall, adjust it to 12'3". And then this automatically updated to the correct number because of just kind of how the math is going to work out. But what I would do if I wanted to change that one is I would click on this wall and then I can change that one. This, I'm always just going to work my way up through a line, is I want this to be 6'3". Whoops. I'm going to click on this wall and make it 6'3". And then I'll do 5'5½". So I'll click on this wall, 5'5½". I'll Click on this wall. It's going to be kind of hard to click on just the wall. There we go. And I believe it was 2'3.5". And then this one, I think, is kind of the one that just resolves itself. Yeah. And so sort of work your way down a line with your dimensions in it. Whoa, I didn't mean to pan like that. So for this window here, from face of stud to middle of window to face of stud. So DI for the dimension tool. Face of stud to middle of window to face of stud. Click up to place your dimension string. Hit escape 100 times. Click on your window and see again, sometimes these witnesses that pop up automatically just sort of get in the way. So what I usually do when that happens is I zoom in, click on it, and then these automatic witnesses are not as much in the way. And then I can change my numbers. And so every dimension that you see in this floor plan here, you are going to want to make sure that you add to your floor plan in Revit. But that's as far as we'll get into this demo for it. In our next video, we will go over creating some section views and renderings for this.